What's going on, one and all? Seedling Space here, where we like to talk about all the cool activities happening in the space industry during the past week. Now, this week has been filled with all kinds of excitement across the board, so let's start with the big dogs. Up first to bat, we have Blue Origin making headlines this week with their launch of famous actor William Shatner on their second launch for private passengers on the New Shepherd's 18th mission. For those of you who live under a rock like me, William Shatner is the actor who portrayed Star Trek's original Captain James T. Kirk. I thought it was very fitting that he went on this trip, being that he has acted in a role that is based around space activities that portrayed as normal living for such a long time. And now, to be able to experience the weightlessness of space firsthand, this just seemed really awesome to me and kind of closes that loop in his life. He even said the following: "I hope I never recover from this. I hope that I can maintain what I feel now. I don't want to lose it." You can imagine the emotion that he had, because in an indirect way, that man devoted a huge portion of his life to portraying space exploration, and now he had the chance to really experience it for himself, truly. I just think that is just phenomenal. Alrighty, next in the news is Rocket Lab's announcement of the acquisition of Advanced Solutions Inc., based out of Littleton, Colorado. Rocket Lab's $40 million purchase buys them access to spaceflight software, guidance, navigation and control expertise, and an advanced spacecraft simulation environment, as well as many more great technologies. Additionally, there is another $5.5 million on the line for Advanced Solutions if they have a strong performance this year. My guess is that Rocket Lab is willing to pay a little bit more if it means strong performance to report in their annual filings at the end of the year. From what I've read, this is just the start of a few acquisitions that Rocket Lab is planning towards its goal of creating a fully vertically integrated space technology company. Since going public, Rocket Lab is well positioned with a healthy amount of cash on the books for very targeted acquisitions. One article that I read even mentioned that Rocket Lab's founder and CEO, Peter Beck, is targeting smaller mom-and-pop aerospace companies which are profitable, rather than focusing on venture-funded companies with just hopes and dreams of success. I think this makes sense, as Rocket Lab is trying to establish itself as a force to be reckoned with, especially when compared to companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX, and ULA. And so far, they have already proven that, but they do have a little ways to go before they're at their level. Next is Astra Space with their announcement of a new launch window coming up in the next few weeks. This comes after their previous launch failure in which one engine failed to ignite, causing the rocket to glide sideways, but staying vertical. Eventually, the rocket was able to make its way upwards to a reasonable height before the mission was aborted. Both this new launch and the previous one was carrying a dummy payload for the US Space Force, and Astra has announced that they've actually figured out what the issue was, and it was related to some propellants leaking in a place that they should not have and igniting, causing a shutdown of one of the engines. While Astra did fail to reach orbit on its 6th rocket attempt, the fact that it remained upright and eventually did make its way upwards to a reasonable height is highly respectable, because rocket science is hard and there's very few players in this space, so the fact that they were able to come such a long way so far is a good sign for their longevity. Astra has mentioned that they've been working on some modifications to adjust for this anomaly, and hopefully those adjustments will be enough for their 7th upcoming launch to be their first successful launch into orbit. Whether you're a fan of Astra or just want to watch them succeed, let's go ahead and smash that like button to see if we can get more likes than the number of kilometers in altitude that their launch vehicle is able to reach. Now moving on to the smaller guys, Orbit Fab on October 14th announced that it had signed a cooperative research and development agreement with AFRL Space Vehicles Directorate. Orbit Fab is a small startup company that is working on the challenging problem of in-orbit refueling. This will help strengthen their position in the market and gives them stronger legs to stand on as they entrench themselves as a player in the space market. This follows a hefty $10 million fundraise last month for the company, with investors from the big granddaddies in aerospace such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. I am definitely excited to see them continue their stride and see where they end up in the next few years. Now moving back to the bigger news, China is sending a female astronaut to their new space station, which will make her the first woman to work aboard it. This is a big deal for women because in the past, women tend to be a much smaller portion of the population in the industry. And this topic really means a lot to me because I want to see a lot more diversity in the space industry, and slowly but surely we are getting there, and it's a great thing to see. I almost wonder if this is an attempt by China to compete with the United States Artemis program, which is focused on landing the first woman and the first person of color on the moon. Regardless of the rivalries between the countries, I think this is a fantastic move on both parts, and I'm really glad that we are seeing that diversity. And a good example of why is back in my undergrad, we would have classes where there'd be 40 males and only 1 female. So seeing this change is just awesome. Let's finish up the big dogs. United Launch Alliance, the biggin, has launched the NASA space probe called Lucy on a 12-year journey to various asteroids in the main asteroid belt and those in Jupiter's orbit around the sun called the Jupiter Trojans. ULA launched Lucy on its famed Atlas V launch vehicle, and I'm super excited to see what kind of scientific insights we get from this spacecraft. Lastly, another startup called Spaced Ventures has announced that it has raised $1.2 million to make investing in space companies easier and more accessible to the public. That means that average people like you and me can now invest in private equity deals with small space startups. Private equity investments are the types of deals that investors like the sharks off a Shark Tank go for because of their potentially explosive returns. I think this is good timing since space companies have already started popping up on some of the other crowdfunding sites like WeFunder and NetCapital, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty more coming out. Now, while this sounds like a great deal, you have to take a step back and learn about the risks here. For instance, statistically speaking, 90% of startups end up failing. So you can imagine if you put a lot of money into a lot of these different companies, most of them will fail. And so you can hope that the ones that do survive end up making you more returns than the other 90% would lose you. And that's why there's a lot of risks involved, and it could potentially be higher or lower depending on what you're investing in and how the market reacts to it. If you want to see a video going on a deeper dive on the possibilities of crowdfunding and private equity investments, let me know in the comments section down below. Alrighty guys and girls, that is it for this week's highlights. If you would like to see more videos like this, click the like and subscribe buttons. Whether you think that the recent announcements from Rocket Lab or Astra is going to affect their stock price, or if you just have a certain topic that you're really interested in, let me know in the comments section down below and I'll find a way to incorporate it in later videos. For now, this is Seedling Space signing out.